Let's look at how we can make some custom UVs that are intentional for an object and that involve unfolding and unwrapping that object. I have here a polygonal object. It began as a sphere, and the default UVs are not helpful in the way that I want to manage the texture data on the top of the object and this bottom area that I've extruded down here. I don't have UVs. If I were to select, say, one of those faces, that face has no UVs. It's just a plane within the original UV set. So the first step I'm going to do is delete my UVs. I should also mention that on this left-hand side panel, I've loaded my UV editor. I'm also going to open my Show UV Toolkit, and maybe I'll dock that over here. I'm going to create, first off, some camera-based UVs, and these I'm going to throw away pretty quickly. They're just there to give me a starting point on my model. I'm going to, in my model, edit edges, and the approach I'm taking here is I'm defining areas where I want to separate my UVs. And if I double-click on this edge, it now has selected the edge loop that runs all the way around my model. And in my UV toolkit, I'm going to choose under Cut and Sew to cut that. And what I have now, if I select UV shells in my UV window, is I have this shell separated and this shell separated. So my shells are free moving components of UVs that are not tied to each other. And so with this set of UVs, let's see, I could create, maybe try some cylindrical mapping, but I'm not really pleased with that. I could make a maybe planar mapping from a certain direction, but I'm not quite pleased with that either. Let's try a planar mapping from above. That might work from above, depending on how I wanted to manage my textures. I could also unfold. So in my unfold settings in my UV toolkit, unfolding is going to take these UVs and essentially stretch them out and allow them to relax, such that if I were to select this face now, I can see that I have unique UV coordinates for the underside face, as well as for this side face, and for the top face. So if I wanted to be able to make a round texture that could wrap all the way around these objects, this would be a very powerful way of making that. If I decided instead that I wanted maybe my very top piece to be a separate set of coordinates, I could go back under Edge, double-click Edge, double-click that edge. There we go. And cut that. And now under shells, I have this shell separate from this shell. And perhaps here I would rather make that cylindrical and use my move, rotate, and scale tools to change that. So I'm beginning to separate these into strategic pieces. I would want them all to fit eventually into this 0 to 1 area, but let's leave that until we've got the components we want. I'm going to move down to the bottom of my object, double-click, and cut that set of UVs. And I think with these UVs, I also want to make them cylindrical. You know what? I'm going to actually select this edge and also cut it. And I'll make those coordinates cylindrical. And this bottom piece, I think I'm going to make a planar projection. Or you know what, let's try just unfold. No. Planar. There we go. And then the last set of UVs that I'll need for this body, I'm going to pick a seam point, which is challenging to do strategically, but I'm going to pick, let's say here's where I would want my seam to be. and I'm going to cut. And now if I select that shell and I unfold, maybe optimize is going to kind of relax that a little bit. I could rotate. Now I have all of these distinct UV shell components, and I could begin to scale them so that they would all fit together into the space. And I would determine which of these UVs are most critical in terms of size and detail, and I would optimize the size and scale and location of these to give me the most value in terms of how much of my texture space it is occupying. The really key critical point being that I am fitting them all into my 0 to 1 space from 0, 0 to 1, 1, my normalized space for my textures. And now I've taken this object that really didn't work well with any single projection and begun to make a packed set of UV shells that are specifically catered to that object. So that's using the UV toolkit and the UV editor, using cut, unfold, and optimize as a relaxer, and all with edge selections to determine where those seams are in Maya 2022.